We ready? Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Good evening, City of Conway. I'd like to welcome everyone to our May Planning Commission meeting. My name is Brandon Rule. We will begin with a call to order and roll call. Let's go ahead with our roll call. Mr. Ingram.
Hey, I'm here. Present.
Thank you, Arthur. And Ms. Tucker.
I'm here.
Ms. Fincher.
Present.
Mr. Gaynor.
Present.
Ms. Sanders Jones.
Present.
Ms. King.
Present.
Mr. Townsend.
Present.
Mr. Webb.
Present.
And Ms. Williams.
Present.
Excellent. We have a full quorum, and as you guys have seen, we've got a pretty full agenda this evening. We will begin with the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which would have been April 19th. Any questions, comments, concerns about those minutes?
No, sir. I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Thank you. We've got a motion from Larry and a second from Brian. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. We've kind of got a reverse order this evening. We've got that one subdivision item which has been moved down to the bottom in congruence with the rezoning up above that's associated with it. So we're going to begin with our public hearing items this evening. I will state that the Conway Planning Commission makes recommendations to the City Council on public hearing items. The items reviewed on this agenda will be considered by the City Council as early as May 25th, 2025. Items not approved by the Planning Commission tonight may be appealed to the City Council within 30 days of the date of the Planning Commission denial, with the exception of any decisions made by the Planning Commission acting as the Board of Zoning Adjustment. I will also state when we get into these public hearing items, we would like to limit the time to speak in favor of a proposal or in opposition of a proposal. We will start with the first person to speak in favor or opposition to give them 10 minutes to speak. And then any subsequent speakers, whether supporting or opposing, excuse me, will allow 2 minutes for each one of those speakers. So with that, we will jump into item A, which is a request to rezone property at 507 Bruce Street from a C3 to a PUD. And we have staffer Mr. Hill here to walk us through this request.
Yeah, the applicant is requesting a rezoning from C3 to PUD, which is planned unit development. As you mentioned, it's for the property at 507 Bruce Street. The rezoning plan proposes 2 commercial lots along Bruce Street with 15 duplex or townhouse residential lots to the rear of the property. All lots would be accessed by the new internal drive, and all parking would be located behind structures, both for the commercial and residential uses. The townhomes would be located far away from the rear property lines, with parking and landscape buffers separating the rear of the structures to the neighboring properties. And additionally, a 6-foot solid fence has been included as a recommended condition. You may remember the previous rezoning application for this site requesting an R1 zoning a few months back, and at which time your commission requested that the applicant work with staff and attempt to revise the application in a way that might be more compatible with surrounding uses. Staff has met with the applicant's consultant and feels that most of the concerns have been addressed in the plan or in the recommended conditions. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning request with the conditions as noted in the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Levi. Commissioners, any immediate questions for Levi? Okay, we will open the floor up to any support we have for this. I believe we have Mr. French on the line. Are you here to speak in favor of the applicant?
Yes, this is Bobby French. My address is 1021 Front Street, Conway. Yeah, it's pretty much Levi said. We worked with them, had our town hall meeting. I think we had the neighbor kind of come on. We, tried to address all the issues. I think this was pretty good compromise, and I believe it will work. I think Levi and staff, worked with us good, and we appreciate them. And if y'all got any questions, be glad to answer them.
I don't have any immediate questions. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Bobby? Okay, let's see. Do we have some opposition to this request?
Yes, we've got some public comment. This is from Brian Armstrong at 419 Bruce Street, Conway, Arkansas, 72032. Our biggest concern is the fact we purchased our lot because it was C3 and are trying to move our businesses away from residential areas. Our current yard is protected by a 6-foot fence, high-intensity lighting, and security cameras. This doesn't stop the hoodlums from simply cutting a hole in the fence, and theft is a big problem, as well as fence repairs. If this passes, the residential problems will follow us, and theft will become worse because our business is expanding into mower and ATV sales and repair. The developer, who will sell and then be gone forever, is only planning a 6-foot fence, and it will be 45 years of residential complaints about the noise and lights next door. 24-hour truck traffic and constant theft and property destruction complaints from our side. This proposal needs to be denied, or if not, then at least modified to include an 8-foot mortar wall all the way around the development. The 6-foot fence isn't even close to acceptable. Please also consider the fact that the 8-foot mortar wall doesn't block out the high lights and noise, so while the theft will be less, the residential complaints may not. Respectfully submitted, Brian Armstrong, 419 Bruce Street, Conway, Arkansas, 72032.
Thank you, James. Any other opposition? I don't believe anyone else on the line to speak in favor or in opposition to this request.
No, I would like to, this is Bobby again, I would like to address that a little bit if possible.
Thank you.
I know that, we did talk with James and them on that area, James, and we agreed to do it. He had some trees that he thought would make a good shrub line over there. And I don't even remember, James can probably tell you what they were. And we agreed to put those in there. They're a tall growing evergreen that makes a big brush line that he recommended. And, as far as the lights and stuff, I'm pretty sure that any lighting over there would be required to be inward, downward, and shrouded. So, just the normal subdivision, the site plan review process would not allow them just to have, gleaming lights, and this is, what they're proposing is a nice townhome. It's not just a, government subsidy or something. I'm pretty sure, it's not going to be people going to tear and try to steal lawnmowers over there. It's going to be it's a nice neighborhood. It's not going to be, I don't know what they're thinking, but it's going to be nice and craftsman style homes, pushed up close, and should be a good neighborhood.
Thank you, Bobby.
Those trees are Thua green giants.
Good to know. Any additional support, favor, or opposition? Okay, we will bring this back into commission for discussion. Commissioners, what do you think? It sounded to me like the opposition, they were speaking about the lights specifically. They were talking about their existing lights, and they're concerned about the future tenants or property owners of those townhomes might have some issues with the light from the existing facility next door. But I'm of the mind to think that if it's there as an existing condition when they move into it, then it shouldn't be as of much of a concern.
I do have a quick question. I know that this was request for R1 a couple months ago, and now it's PUD. What's the big difference? I mean, I know the difference in the dwellings, but what's the big difference as to why it's not acceptable for residential, but it is for multiple units?
Sure. So one of the primary differences is basically with it being PUD, the applicant has the ability to kind of shift some of the required setbacks. So where R1 zoning district would require a 25-foot setback on lots as narrow as this under an R1 development, it would really push the units pretty much as close to the east and west property lines as they could be, which it was a primary concern with the neighboring resident. So this particular plan provides a larger physical barrier and distance, and then also allows specific conditions to be applied, such as the landscape screening, fencing, and things like that that aren't necessarily required under the R1 zoning district.
Also, we maintain the commercial property up along Bruce Street up there. That would have that commercial feel. Still going as kind of multi-use property.
Hey, this is Rebecca. It sounded like to me, and I could have misunderstood, but that the opposition letter had said that if this was approved, it needed to have an 8-foot fence. Bobby, did you say y'all were agreeable to do that, or I can't? What was decided on that?
Well, I mean, when we talked to him in the meeting, he was saying a brick mortar fence. I mean, it sounds like, it's almost like he wants us to build their fence for them. I mean, if they're going to have
Gotcha.
if they're going to have something, they have the opportunity. They could build whatever they want to keep people out. I mean, most businesses do that. They build their own barrier if they have a problem. But to separate us from them, we were saying we would put a fence, and then James, when we had our meetings, James was pretty much told us that he was okay with just these trees as a barrier. But we were like, okay, we'll put this fence, and then these trees that that staff recommended that grow real tall, real fast, and they make a barrier probably taller than 8 foot once they're grown, and I'm pretty sure they grow real fast too.
Okay, so just so I'm understanding, the staff recommendation number 11 is a 6-foot tall solid fence shall be constructed along the southeast and west property lines. But then what you're saying is that the trees would accomplish more than 8 foot that's requested. Is that right?
I believe so. I'm not super familiar with these trees besides what James has told me about them, but I think they get taller than 8 foot.
Okay. I'm caught up with you. I'm tracking with you now. Okay, thank you.
Just as a reference, those trees at maturity, full maturity, grow 30 to 40 feet. So they're very dense, heavy evergreen.
And you can see on the proposed site plan that Bobby has provided on page 7 that those shrub lines run down the east and west property lines. I'm seeing the note and the line weight with the X on it, which indicates that 6-foot privacy fence along the east and south border, but it doesn't look like any was proposed for that west border.
Correct. Yeah, there's already a fence over there, and there wasn't any concern from them. And I believe those trees will make a barrier along with, I think, the chain link fence that's over there currently.
And I'll just, if the commission is okay with just a fence on the eastern and southern property lines, there will need to be an adjustment made to one of the conditions, condition 11, it does note the western property line as well, so that'll need to be adjusted in the record.
Commissioners, any further questions or comments for staff or for Mr. French?
I mean, if there's no other questions, I'll move to approve with all the staff recommendations as written.
I second.
And to clarify, as written, without the amendment that we just discussed to the west property line?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Commissioners, we have a motion from Rebecca and a second from Mr. Webb, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any
I need to abstain, please.
Okay, we have an abstention from Ms. King. So motion passes 9 to 1 abstention. Moving on to item B, request to rezone property at 39,000 Oaks from A1 to R1, and Mosquito is going to present this one to us.
Yes, good evening. So the applicant is seeking to rezone the property from A1 to R1 in order to allow for a lot split. The minimum lot area required in the A1 zoning district is 1 acre. And as this lot is 1.83 acres, a lot split in the current zoning would create at least one non-conforming lot, so they're requesting the rezoning to R1. The comprehensive plan designates the area as suburban residential, and other lots in the Thousand Oaks subdivision range in area from 1 to 3 acres. I don't know if you're familiar with the area, but given the extreme topography out there and the lack of sewer service, it's likely that only one additional lot could be created and still be consistent with the large lot design of the subdivision. As a result, planning staff recommends approval of the rezoning. It will allow for appropriate use of the property, and it will not likely negatively impact the adjacent properties.
Thank you, Beth. We have anyone online as far as the applicant to speak in favor of this request?
I'm online, Mary Talley. Yes, thank you.
Hello, Ms. Talley. Would you mind stating your address for the record?
It's 39,000 Oak Circle, 71232.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add that Beth didn't cover?
No, she pretty well got it. We're just wanting to build a home that is handicap accessible. We're in a white neighborhood. My son has MS, and this is a very nice, quiet neighborhood, not very much traffic at all. And it allows my son to walk with his rollator. We do not have sidewalks out here. If we moved into town, he might fall on sidewalks. And this is just a nice neighborhood that we know all of our neighbors. They help us with him, and we would really appreciate being able to do this. And we're wanting to get a yard that's much less work for us to keep up with.
I understand. Thank you very much for adding those comments. We have anyone online or on the web speak in opposition of this request? Seeing that there is none, we'll bring it back into commission for discussion. Commissioners, any additional comments or questions necessary?
I have a question. Mary, this is Ann Tucker. I'm actually her neighbor. What square footage are you guys looking at to build this house for Chris?
We're looking about 25, 26 on the bottom and just put maybe 600 foot upstairs.
Are you going to sell your house and all of you move in?
Yes, we're going to, this is approved, we will sell our house, yes.
Well, guys, I'm her neighbor. I live right around the corner from her, and I believe that it can support, her lot can support 2 dwellings. Most of the lots out there are close to 2 acres, if not over 2 acres. Um, we kind of like it that way, but I don't believe that it will cause any hardship to any of the neighbors.
Great, thank you for that input, Ann.
I'll move to approve as written.
Second.
Now we have a motion from Rebecca and a second from Brian. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion passes unanimously. Good luck, Mary.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, we move into item C, which is a request to rezone from A1 to R1, which is 29.99 acres north of Bill Bell Lane. This is the subdivision item we'll be looking at the end of our agenda. And Mr. Hill.
Thank you. Yes, as mentioned, the applicant's requesting a rezoning from A1, which is agricultural, to R1, single-family residential. The property is located along Bill Bell Lane and South German, just shy of 30 acres in total. The proposed rezoning is being sought in order to allow the development of single-family residential uses. The surrounding area consists of predominantly undeveloped land and existing single-family development. The rezoning request is consistent with the site's comprehensive plan designation, which is single-family. And staff recommends approval of the rezoning request as it would likely not negatively impact any of the adjacent property. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Seeing no immediate questions, we'll open the floor to the applicant or the owner.
Yes, I'm Frank and I'm in here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Mr. Shaw, how are you this evening?
Good evening. Thank you for all the commissioners being present and in attendance tonight to consider our proposal. We have rezoned or asking to rezone 29.99 acres. The subdivision, I guess we'll get to later, is a portion of that, about 43 lots, and it will be consistent with the neighborhood that is already in existence to the east and to the west, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
and in the general neighborhood. We appreciate the input we've gotten from the planning department. We're ready to go if y'all see fit to pass. We will be back with another subdivision request in the next few months on the remaining parcel. This is about 8 acres or a little more, and we have about 21 more acres that we're in the planning on that will be similar to this and consistent with.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll open the floor to any additional support. And how about any opposition? I believe we have one.
Yes, we had a letter received from Jennifer Case. It says, Dear Planning Commission, I'm writing out of concern for rezoning application REZ 2021 May 02, which is this case. First, I would like to request to remove the vote I apparently made for this application on your website. I was trying to vote no, but it seems your app automatically records any click of this button as a yes and does not offer the opportunity to remove a vote. Please disregard or remove the vote I made on 5/6 around 8:50 a.m. That's in reference to our GIS site that allows, one of the native features of it allows somebody to heart an application. It's intended to allow people to provide comments.
Yeah, I didn't know that it existed.
Second, is there additional information about the kind of development that the developer is requesting? If so, I would like to know how many homes the developer is proposing and the size of the homes. Third, I would like to voice my dismay over the many housing developments currently being built in South Conway area near Ellen Smith. This is a residential area previously appreciated for its many undeveloped areas and trees. The subdivisions you have approved on Favre and Salem are stripping the land of the trees, eliminating green spaces and increasing vehicle traffic, which makes it unsafe for Ellen Smith Elementary students to walk to school. The area around Favre and South German is especially dangerous for foot traffic. As a resident of this area, I'm very concerned with the destruction of mature trees for the sake of housing developments that Conway does not seem to need. The subdivision just north of Ellen Smith has no houses in it. Salem Oaks on Salem is not yet full. The lots in the new development between Tucker Creek Road and Smoking Oaks Road have been empty for years, and the large apartment complex near Central Landing remain empty. Does Conway really need additional developments, or will this become another eyesore? Although I understand the need to provide housing for Conway's population, I firmly ask the Planning Commission to consider the necessity and benefit of green space. As a resident of the area, I would very much prefer this parcel of land remain undeveloped. If it has to be developed, I ask you to require the developer to leave as many trees standing as possible, especially along the roadway. As a side note, I would very much like to see the City of Conway invest in safe sidewalks near the South German Favre intersection, especially with the trail work being built near Stone Dam Creek. Residents of this area should be able to safely get to Stone Dam Creek and Ellen Smith Elementary School. Sincerely, Jennifer Case, Conway, Arkansas.
Thank you, James. Any additional opposition or support for this request before we bring it back into commission? Commissioners, the floor is yours for discussion. I will say I think this is congruent with the land use in that area. It does make good use of that kind of triangular shaped parcel of land, I believe. These lots fit in here fairly well. And the size looks to be congruent with the rest of the neighborhoods. Any other thoughts?
I say, based on the recommendations of the staff, I make recommendation for approval.
So we have a motion from Mr. Webb with the conditions, 11 conditions. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm skipping forward. I was looking at the back. With the comments and recommendations made by the planning staff. We have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Drew. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye as well. Any opposed? And any abstaining? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We will move into item D. This is another request to rezone. This one is from A1 to C2, which exists at 20 Bronnie Lane. Ms. Skeeto.
Yes, so the applicant is seeking to rezone the property there at 20 Bronnie Lane, plus the adjacent 5.1 acres there to the west. They would like to rezone it from A1 to C2 for the ultimate purpose of developing it as a self-storage facility. The applicant has a secondary application for a conditional use permit, which is next on the agenda. And that application will be dependent on the outcome of this, as mini storage is not permitted by right or conditional use permit in the A1 zoning district. So this property is located between South Harkrider Street, which is Highway 365, and Interstate 40. A portion of the site is currently developed with a 30,000 square foot metal office and warehouse building, which houses the applicant's existing garage door and guttering businesses, while the majority of the remaining undeveloped portion of the site is located in the floodplain. The surrounding area is developed primarily with institutional, office, and automotive uses. A rezoning to C2 would allow many commercial uses by right, and it could generate a significant amount of additional traffic, given that much of the site is currently undeveloped. However, given the extensive site work required for development and the applicant's proposed plan for self-storage, it is likely the traffic increase will be far less, closer to 193 trips per typical weekday. While the requested rezoning is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, this is likely due to the fact that most large rural properties are designated for single-family development without consideration for proximity to major arterials and utility access. As such, staff recommends approval of the rezoning, as it will allow for appropriate development of the site, and it will not likely negatively impact adjacent properties.
Thank you, Beth. Now I'd like to call on the owner or the applicant to speak in favor.
Yeah, this is Bobby French, 1021 Front Street. I'm representing the owner here. basically it's what they said. They'd like to rezone this, and get a conditional use to put some storage buildings in there. The Coneys, own that property. They own the property adjacent. They have their office there, Coney garage door there currently. And, this would just kind of go around their office and then go back towards Harkrider. And that's what they'd like to do. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bobby. Anyone on the line to speak in opposition to this request? All right, we will bring it back into commission. Bobby, the only question I had was in regards to floodplain level. I see here 78% of this property is undevelopable. Am I reading that right?
Well, they would have to bring in, considerable amount of fill and, to do what they're wanting to do, bring some fill in and I would imagine they would probably build this in phases and kind of fill it in as they go. And they would, obviously they would have to work with engineering, street department, Finley and them on, floodplain permits and all that stuff, to do any, before they did anything. But, they do know that there is some floodplain and stuff in there that they would have to do, and possible even some detention. I'm not sure, but they'd work with staff and engineering to make sure that they got all that correct.
I'm with you, yeah, and it looked like there was already some fill being positioned on the site whenever I drove by. So. Commissioners, what do you think?
I have a question. Are we not asking them to make street improvements because it's in a rural area? Because the street improvement said it does not meet city standards.
Well, typically we don't do the street improvements that, there would be some impact. There'd be impact fees that they would pay when they build these, and that money goes into the city. And, typically that's what the city uses to make the improvements at some point when they need it.
Yeah, Ray, this is James. We do not, Bobby's correct. We don't require half street improvements or street improvements related. That the impact fee is meant to be monies that is spent on the development's impact citywide. So that's why we do not require that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Well, then, if no other discussion, I'll make a move that we approve the zoning request for 20 Bronnie Lane to a C2 neighborhood commercial.
Second.
Thank you, Ray. We have a motion from Ray and a second from Brian. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining?
I need to abstain.
Thank you, Laura. So we have one abstention and motion passes 9-1 abstention. So we'll move into the second part of this request. As Beth mentioned, requests are for conditional use permit for mini storage in a C2 zoning.
Okay, yep, still looking at the same property. As we've already discussed, the applicant is seeking a conditional use permit to allow mini storage in a C2. And again, the traffic is not expected to, increase significantly given the proposed use. It's a good fit, as previously stated, that there's lots of institutional and office and automotive uses there. There's no residential in the area. If approved, the development would be subject to both development review and subdivision review processes, where we would deal with all of the site improvements and the plating of the property. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit, and we've proposed 11 conditions that are located on page 22 of the staff report.
Thank you, Beth. Bobby, I assume you're aware of these 11 recommendations that have been stated.
Yes, I don't believe that they have any issues with any of those. I'm kind of looking through them real quick, make sure last minute. Give me just a second.
No problem.
No, I don't see any problem. Those are just pretty much typical, conditions there. I think they shouldn't have any problem with.
Great, thank you. Anything additional you needed to add?
No, I mean, I think we've already, pretty much said it all unless anybody has any more questions.
Yes, sir. Now I guess we could call on any opposition to this request. None noted. All right, commissioners, the floor is yours.
Well, we approved the rezoning for this to happen, so I don't have any questions.
Based on the recommendation of the staff, I make a motion to approve.
A second.
Great, thank you. We have a motion from Larry and a second from Ray. All those in favor to approve this conditional use permit for mini storage in a C2, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ms. King, are you abstaining again?
I have to abstain, thank you.
You betcha. Motion passes 9-1. All right, we'll move on to item F, which is a request to rezone a C3 to MF3, and this is the site at 1320 Lewis Ranch Road. Mr. Hill.
Thank you. The applicant is requesting a rezoning from C3 Highway Commercial to MF3, which is a multifamily density of 24 units per acre, for the purpose of developing a multifamily residential development. Based on the acreage alone, if approved, the property would allow up to 114 residential units, but that is not counting any property that would be necessary for required detention or anything. So that doesn't necessarily mean you'll end up with 114, but that's based on the sheer density allowed. The surrounding area consists of undeveloped commercially zoned property with existing commercial uses in the general area. The comprehensive plan designation for the site is general industry, which supports a broad spectrum of zoning districts, including multifamily when designed appropriately. The property features sufficient access, and given the permitted uses in the current zoning district of C3, the request could actually reduce potential traffic impacts depending on what the property would otherwise develop as. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning request as it would not likely negatively impact adjacent property and is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation for the site. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Levi. We would now have an opportunity to hear any additional support from the applicant or anyone else in the general public.
Yes, this is Adam Harrison. I'm with Trinity Development. We're, of course, as you can see, requesting an MF3 zoning on this property. Our plans currently look like we're trying to fit around 106 units on this particular property. We have been working with Conway Corp and Mr. Dale to try and work out something with an easement road that they have to the electrical substation there. They did not want us to block that road off and put any kind of gate on it. So we've been reworking some plans to accommodate their needs. Their needs will be accommodated somehow so they can fit pole trucks in and out of there with ease. So we've been working with them on that. If anybody has any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Yeah, it looks, here in that site plan, y'all see that substation that's immediately to the west. But the property, it continues southward up to Lewis Ranch Road, and it appears this property is kind of positioned in the back right, which would be northeast corner of the Lewis Ranch development, which seems to make sense to me. I guess we can open the floor to any additional support or opposition. Okay, now we can bring it back in discussion. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. Like I was saying, I think for me it makes sense. Commissioners, what do you think?
Makes sense to me.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Great, we have a motion from Rebecca and a second from Larry. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye as well. Any opposed? And any abstaining? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good luck with your development. We'll move into item G, which this is a request to modify. Am I on the right item? Yep. G, sorry. Request to modify conditional use permit number 1382, religious activities. This is occurring at 1715, 1717, and 1727 South Donaghey Avenue. And as you know, this is better known as the Soul Food Cafe Mission property. Mr. Hill.
Thank you. Yes, as mentioned, the applicant's requesting to modify the existing conditional use permit for Soul Food Cafe Mission, which is approved for religious activities located there at 1715 South Donaghey Avenue. As your staff report details a series of code violations that were discovered on the property, which more or less triggered the application to modify the existing CUP. So there's a few different changes that are being proposed to the existing conditional use permit. To summarize the request, the applicant is requesting the following modifications. Expansion of uses to allow residential uses, installation of accessory structures not meeting the separation and foundation requirements of the zoning code, expansion of the associated parking area not meeting the surfacing requirements of the zoning code, and installation of additional fencing beyond what is allowed by the existing CUP. To speak specifically towards the accessory structures and the unpermitted parking expansion, these two items represent the violations that exist on site presently. As previously mentioned, there's an existing conditional use permit that was approved in 2018, and that original approval document is included in your staff report. Access to the site is significantly limited to an unimproved access drive off of South Donaghey Avenue. With that, staff has recommended denial of the requested expansion of uses outside of those currently allowed by the existing conditional use permit. In consultation with the fire department, it was determined that any expansion of uses would be considered unsafe and inappropriate at this time, given the limited access to the site. Beyond that, staff has recommended approval of the added accessory structures and parking lot expansion subject to the conditions noted in the report, specifically that all additions to the site and improvements be properly permitted and brought into conformance with the applicable building, zoning, and fire codes. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any immediate questions for Mr. Hill? Okay, great. So we will open the floor up for, and again, I'd like to give the first person in support of this request 10 minutes to speak, and then any additional supporters 2 minutes to speak on any different topics that might not have been stated by the original proposal or supporter. And then likewise for opposition, we'll give you guys 10 minutes for the first person to speak, and then any additional opposers to speak for 2 minutes. So with that, I'll open the floor. Do we have the applicant on the line or someone to speak in favor of this request?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is David Hogue, local attorney.
David, can you state your address for the record?
Yes, it's 575B Hark. That's all.
You broke up there for a minute. You say Harkrider?
Harkrider,
Okay,
corner of Harkrider and Deer Street.
gotcha.
And I'm just an attorney representing Soul Food, so I'm not a neighbor or anything like that. I'm an attorney.
Okay.
So I guess the first thing that I would say is that I'm not sure that I fully agree with the requests as characterized by the staff. So for example, when the staff says that there's a request for residential use, I would agree with that, but that's just a simple matter of the Harveys are requesting to put a parsonage on that property so that they can live on the property themselves. That would be the only residential use they're requesting. Simply to say that they're requesting a variance or something for residential use is true, but it sounds a lot broader than it actually is. Secondly, I would just go through the, I'm not sure that, well, I am sure that the Soul Food Cafe disputes the alleged violations. So as far as the expansion of the parking lot, just as an example, you saw a picture on there, and whoever is controlling the shared screen, there we go, thank you. The picture shows not an expansion of the parking lot, but gravel covering the parking lot that was already there. So you can see the tree line around the parking lot, and there was gravel there, but people could and would park in the dirt part of that parking lot. And that was approved from the very beginning. So this is in no way an expansion. The tree line, if it moved, would constitute an expansion. Simply covering dirt with gravel is not an expansion of the parking lot. It's just making the parking lot better. What I would like to do is go through the recommendations and tell you where we have issues. So the first one is number 4. Number 4 says an 8-foot fence along the north property boundary. When we were here in 2018, the Planning Commission, City Council specifically approved a 6-foot fence. My client spent a substantial amount of money on building that 6-foot fence to satisfy the city and the people around that property. And they're running a ministry. They're not running a for-profit enterprise. And so to come back, 3 years later and say, well, the 6-foot fence that we approved in the first place is not enough. We want an 8-foot fence now. We express our objection to. Number 6 says a minimum of 10 feet shall separate all structures on site. And then number 7 goes with it, says all structures shall be installed on a permanent foundation with continuous footing. My clients they understand the spirit of that because they want to make sure that, and I think my clients have just as much interest in making sure that the buildings are stable, aren't going to be blown away, aren't going to cause property damage to other people, and so forth. Having built a few houses myself and having been the lawyer when our county justice building was built, I think that I'm pretty confident when I say that simply having a single footing all through the whole thing and being 10 feet apart isn't necessarily going to accomplish the goal. What my clients have done is contacted National Steel Buildings, and they're prepared to pay around $1,700 is the estimate, and that would certify that the 20 by 40 carports would withstand 30 pounds of snow per square feet and 140 miles per hour wind, the like of which Conway hasn't seen in a long time. So I would ask that as I go along, we amend number 4 to be a 6 or 8 foot fence. And then we take 6 and 7 and strike them in favor of just making sure that the buildings are structurally safe and sound. And then 8, parking lot shall be surfaced with asphalt or concrete in accordance with section 1101 of the zoning code. Here again, in 2018, this property was approved as it was. So what's happening is 3 years later, we're coming back, and it's not so much the client's Soul Food coming back and making a request. It's the city coming back and saying, we're not satisfied with what you have done, and we're going to accuse you of a few violations and require more of you than was required in the first place. For them, this both the parking lot and the road, which is mentioned in 11. So I'm looking at 8 and 11. These are fairly well maintained. That's why you see the difference in gravel versus the dirt in the parking lot. The gravel expanding is what the city is calling the parking lot expanding. The gravel expanding is actually just maintaining the parking lot that existed and putting gravel over it rather than dirt. We do the same thing with the road. We're maintaining our property, but coming back after the dirt and gravel was approved in 18 and suddenly requiring them to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to put concrete or asphalt on those same spots is cost prohibitive. And it's so cost prohibitive that it is not borderline, but if actually required, would practically shut down this ministry. Especially considering that things have already been approved and now they're being, my clients are being asked or maybe required, depending on how you're voting tonight, to do more that would take food out of, literally food out of people's mouths in order to put concrete on some dirt. 10 is a landscape screen shall be provided along the north and west property boundaries. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it seems to be strange that there is a section in here that says no more fencing shall be, on 9, no additional fencing shall be installed on site. The reason for that I'm not sure about, but at the same time that it says no more fencing shall be installed on site, we're also saying that a landscape screen shall be provided along the north and west property boundaries. Those don't seem to go together. It seems like we're saying don't put up a fence, but put up a fence, whether it's living or not living, just made of wood or chain link or what. And so the recommendations seem to conflict with one another, and I haven't been able to reconcile them yet. I'm eager to hear that. Finally, on 11, I've addressed that. The access drive shall be improved to a minimum of 20 feet and surfaced with asphalt or concrete. We have a perfectly good road. It's used. When my clients tried to improve their parking lot, they were accused of expanding the parking lot and being in violation. If they do that, I'm afraid that if they follow this recommendation, we're going to come back in a few months and someone's going to say they are violating their conditions by expanding the road or something like that. Finally, on number 13, the existing violations shall be abated and applicable permits shall be sought. That is similar language that when I was county attorney, we used when someone built in the floodplain. And generally what that meant when they said that when we accused someone of building in the floodplain without a permit, there was a recommendation from the floodplain manager that said existing violations shall be abated and applicable permits shall be sought. What that meant when we wrote it at the county level was that they have to tear down all the structures that they've built, get permits to build them the right way, and then build them up again. While I understand the legalities of that, the practicalities, especially when it comes to a ministerial organization that's protected by the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, which is federal law, is a little overboard in my humble opinion. And so we are asking to reconsider numbers 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13, and then allow my clients to continue doing the ministry and helping the folks of Conway that they are helping without undue burdens from the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogue. I mean, we have anyone on the line to speak in additional support of this request? Okay, I'm getting a nod no. And do we have anyone here to speak in opposition of this request?
We did not receive any comments.
Very good. Okay, now we can bring this back into commission for discussion. Levi, do you care to elaborate on any of these recommendations that Mr. Hogue had in question?
I can certainly try. As far as the 8-foot fence along the north property boundary, as previously stated, this more or less was triggered by code enforcement violations that were reported to the city, which prompted the site visit in which the additional violations were noted. So as you see, the photographs included in the report do a pretty good job of documenting those violations, specifically as they pertain to the accessory structures. And I would disagree with Mr. Hogue in respects to the aerial photography shown, in staff's opinion, shows a expansion, and based on the definitions in the zoning code, placing gravel on dirt is in fact improving and expanding a parking area, and it did not go through the proper permitting process of development review that all other commercial and institutional uses in the city go through. So as far as the minimum 10 feet shall separate structures on site, condition number 6, that's straight out of the building code, fire code requirements. Yeah, I'm not sure of any way of getting around complying with those codes. Number 7, structure shall be installed on a permanent foundation with a continuous footing. Again, building code and city ordinance requires that any accessory structure over, or any structure period over 160 square feet is required to be on a permanent foundation with a continuous footing. So again, these are just standard requirements of all structures in the city. Number 8, as far parking lot shall be surfaced with asphalt or concrete. Again, these come out of section 1101 of the zoning code, which pertains to development review. All non-residential uses in the city are required to go through development review. They are required to meet certain commercial and institutional development standards, one of which is all parking and access ways are supposed to be surfaced with sealed surface material, either asphalt or concrete. Pertaining to number 10, the landscape screen to be provided along the north and west property boundaries. Staff would, I agree with Mr. Hogue, it serves the actual same purpose as a fence, except staff's of the opinion that a landscape screen is much more attractive than a fence on all 4 sides of this property. Number 11, access drive to be improved with the minimum width of 20 feet and surfaced with asphalt or concrete. This is simply a requirement that would allow for emergency access to the site. As I noted earlier, all commercial and institutional uses are required to surface with either asphalt or concrete, all parking and drive aisles. To respond to the assertion that we would then create another violation case against this, that is covered in condition Condition number 12, requiring that all these improvements go through development review, would actually reflect the approval of these improvements, so it would not be an issue. And number 13, the existing violations shall be abated and applicable permits to be sought. We do not write it in the same way that Mr. Hogue writes it. We just simply mean that the violation shall either be abated, and in that process, whatever permits are applicable shall be sought. So no one's required to demolish anything in order to abate those violations. The pre-manufactured buildings, they should be relatively easy to move.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and just so I'm clear, I think on number 4, should we say that was in addition to, or that was a correction, or that was a typo going from 6 to 8?
Sorry. So there is an existing fence there, and that, as noted earlier, a source of our complaints have come from that side, and a lot of it is in response to the glare from the portable buildings that have been placed there. So that was the intent and spirit of that condition, is simply to provide additional screening from those neighboring properties.
Gotcha.
And let me, we ended up getting a lot of comments come in, so let me.
I assumed we would.
Let me relay these.
Sure.
Had gotten one comment from Jamie Stratton, asked how do we call in to speak against this about soul food. Another from Dan Hillemeyer. I'm a direct neighbor of this property. I have some concerns about the approval of the parking lot expansion, specifically concerning the west side of the property where a drainage area crosses the middle of the potential expansion area and runs continually regardless of the season or rainfall that currently empties into an open sewer. My concern is that if the sewer drainage is covered, it will negatively impact the drainage in the area. The cul-de-sac adjacent to this property is already very burdened with runoff with any amount of rainfall already, and further drainage may make part of the streets of Violet and Dahlia totally covered with drainage with any rainfall.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, you can see that in the aerial.
With it, and to clarify, some of the reasons why some of these additional conditions are being added. With the conditional use, a lot of times what you're looking at is, let's say that it was approved as it was in 2018, which the approval in 2018 included a requirement for an 8-foot fence. When the intensity of that use increases, where you have additional buildings, that causes additional traffic. When you have additional improvements that occur, that is why those additional conditions related to paving, related to screening, related to all those things come in at that point. So that is some of the staff's thinking in terms of approaching this.
Thank you, James. Yeah, and I see that now on the original conditional use permit, condition number 5, 8-foot fence along the north property line. You know, in my personal understanding of the paving, let's see, where were we? 8 and 11 both pertain to the bearing capacity of fire rescue and access. I've had to deal with this personally, and I believe what we're asking for here with the asphalt and the concrete is just to maintain the bearing capacity for those very heavy vehicles to be able to access the site. Same thing with the access drive, just maintaining that clear width so that they can get back there. And then also in dealing with the storm drainage issues, I believe some of that runoff is more than likely being caused by the daily traffic and it not being a permeable surface it's allowed to erode. So what else? Commissioners?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
May I speak to what I just heard?
Yes.
The regarding the paving and the concrete for the emergency vehicles, after the 2018 hearings on this point, Soul Food had big fire trucks and so forth, specifically, personally, literally out there driving on those surfaces to make sure that those surfaces and that dirt or that gravel would handle those kinds of weights. And it seems like it goes without saying, just a little common sense. The dirt, as far as the drainage goes, the dirt and the gravel is going to soak in the water that would drain onto the neighboring streets a whole lot better than concrete or asphalt would. But we seem to be arguing that let's put concrete or asphalt there because of the weight of the big trucks that would drive on there that have already been tested. And let's see if we can clean up the drainage issues, which would be worse with concrete or asphalt. That's all.
Thank you for that note. Commissioners, open the floor to you. If you have any questions or comments for Mr. Hill or Mr. Hogue?
I have a quick question. One of the first items of request on this was for a residence or parsonage to be put on that property, but I don't see any of the, I don't think I see any of that in the planning notes. Like, is there a space delineated for, like, is there a spot picked out, so to speak, that they're wanting to put this?
May I ask for respond to that? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I respond to that?
Yes, please.
Okay, I don't know the formality, and I'm used to always asking the judge for permission to talk.
You're good.
So you're the judge here. The Quonset hut that you may see marked on the diagrams would be the parsonage. So the answer to the question is yes, that is marked out. It doesn't say it doesn't say parsonage, and why the Harveys want to be so weird as to call their parsonage a Quonset hut, go figure. But the Quonset hut is, I just did that to make them smile. The Quonset hut would be the parsonage.
Yeah, we're pulling up a picture.
So I have a question. If we approve a blanket, I know they say they only want to use the residence for their parsonage. If we approve a residence on there, is it just limited to that, or do they have a full scope to, at that point, though they only want to use the parsonage today, tomorrow they want to change their mind to something else? Is that limited in what they can do in our wording, or how does that work?
That would depend on the wording of the language used whenever the motion is made.
Okay.
We would gladly accept a limitation on the use of that house to the parsonage for them and their family guests or whoever. Obviously, that would be improved.
That's it.
So are they just wanting to remodel that space, or is it going to be torn down and something else built in its place?
These are, thank you for that question. And that just allows me to explain something about them. They devote their lives and everything that they have to helping homeless people get food and ministry. So they would be living in what you see with some remodeling. They're not expecting to tear that down and build what anybody here would call a normal house. They expect to do some remodeling to what you see and live in it and still devote their lives and all their income and so forth to feeding people who need food. Yeah, they'll cut the grass and such and make it look much more presentable. Just because I hear silence, may I say one more thing, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
While I appreciate the statements, and like I said, I used to be a county attorney. I'm still a city attorney in another place, but I appreciate the ideas of that's just what the ordinance says. This is just what the code says. While that is is entirely relevant, and generally we will accept that. There are situations, especially when dealing with a religious use institution like what we have here, that you have to come to a legal analysis and compare the city's interest in regulating these structures and this property as private property owned by a religious institution, and you have to compare their interest balanced with the city's interests in regulating it. In some of these things that we're talking about, it is my humble opinion, as a person who's been practicing law for almost 30 years and argues religious freedom cases and all sorts of other things, that that some of these ordinances that we're talking about, where they just need to follow the simple ordinance and we can't do anything about that, I'm not sure that those simple ordinances would pass constitutional muster in this situation, because I'm not sure the city has the compelling interest required by the Constitution to regulate these particular things in this particular instance.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. We got more comments that have come in.
Thank you.
One comment from Landon Hall 501. How is he expecting to live there when he has a home in Bigelow? ? Barbara McClellan, semi-trucks on there overnight with trucks running all night. I'm not sure if that's referring to an existing condition or if that's referring to a proposed condition. From Jamie Stratton, Rick told us himself and started cutting down trees that he was going to expand the parking lot. That's when my neighbor and I called City Planning Commission to see if he had applied for a permit, and he had not. Everything he has done has been without a permit. It is a business, not a church. He plays music all day long. I kept calling about their plan. I figured this subject would have been tabled. Making it a parsonage would open it up to other things.
If I may respond.
Sure.
What you just heard is mostly things that factually we could dispute and show not to be true, and then logically what's called a slippery slope fallacy. That's all that deserved.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, we are at the commission discussion portion. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. Yes, we are, but I was opening it up to Mr. Hoag to make additional comment.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I do have one more question. I'm hearing Mr. Hoag's statements about the previous matters. Did at any point between the last conditional permit and now were any checks done by the Harveys on if what they were doing was permittable? Did they seek any type of, like, this is what we want to do, can we do this with the parking lot or the structures or anything that's been found out of permit?
We have not received any applications for development permits or building permits for the structures on site.
May I respond to that from their perspective?
Sure.
Again, no. The simple answer is no. The more full answer, but very brief answer, is they, for example, they measured the parking lot by the tree line, not by where the gravel is. So they didn't consider themselves expanding a parking lot because it was still in the tree line, as you can see in the pictures. They put up the huts in a safe way and did, I think, what most people would call due diligence in making sure they were safe, but apparently didn't actually check whether they needed a permit to do that. They are being very careful, but I guess in their own way. Oh, that's true too. My client is pointing out that that generally they have used all of the interior of their buildings to do all of their service and ministry. And you can tell by the pictures in front of you that when COVID happened, they had to move all their ministry outside the buildings. So that made a lot of changes to their ministry and the way they work, as it did to how city council and planning commission meetings work as well. They had to adapt just like we're having to adapt.
In that case, I assume you guys want to maintain the kind of current workflow, the way that it's set up. Is there any intent to go back into the building at any point?
Absolutely. There's as much intent to go back into the building as there is an intent for courtrooms to be courtrooms again, and city councils to meet in city council meetings.
Yeah, that's fair. So at that point, if that did happen, what do you guys think would happen to those accessory structures? They would just kind of stay as they are, or they would possibly become covered parking, or any ideas?
Yes, may I let Mr. Harvey explain that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Rick Harvey, and I'm the director with my wife Tracy for Soul Food Cafe Mission. And the problem that we have is that people couldn't come inside, and so we have extra bread and vegetables and clothing that people desperately need. When they were closing everything down and people couldn't get showers in at truck stops, so we went ahead and put it out in our parking lot. Our problem was the weather. Today was raining. Tomorrow will be raining again. And all of the bread and the vegetables in our boxes that we had things in were breaking apart. The clothing was getting wet to where we couldn't even put it out. So people in need could not get what they needed. So we had to find something that was somewhat sustainable, that wouldn't blow off and that would look nice. And so we got some metal coverings that really blended into our building. And they weren't the usual ones. We went to the metal covering place, and they gave us a discount because we are a church. And they said, we want to help you, Rick, to feed those people that are in need in your community. And so they helped us do it. They're also willing to certify our buildings with 140-mile-an-hour wind certificates. And we'll have to put another $1,700 into it, but we're willing to do that. But even when we go inside the building, we still have what we call the open market, where people can get extra vegetables and extra bread and get their clothing if they want to out there as well, because some people are still not going to want to come into our building. As you know, some people wear masks and some people don't. Some people do drive-up pickup, and some people go into brick and mortar and shop. So we wanted to be able to meet everybody's need without discriminating against anyone. And that's the reason why we're doing what we're doing. It's a COVID-19 pandemic emergency, and we're meeting our community's need. That's what we're trying to do. We need y'all's help. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to say, you might want to cut off public comment. I've got a few more, and then maybe, because they just keep coming in.
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm turning into a proxy of a back and forth, and I don't want to do that. We had a Facebook comment from Mr. Damon Corder asking for guests to be defined, what that is. And then additionally, we had some additional comments. Additional one from Ms. Jamie Stratton said he needs to be in a commercial area, not residential. One from Dan Hillemeyer, all churches and religious institutions in the city of Conway follow these guidelines. Please continue to hold this true to prevent degradation of adjoining properties, no matter their location. From Ms. Stratton, because he never asks, he does what he wants. Mr. Hillemeyer, also to clarify, some of the trees removed prior to inquiring for permits were not located on their property, but instead in the city easement and easement of the adjoining properties. Ms. Stratton said they still should have gotten approval. I think then they won't need these buildings. I think that's assuming post-COVID. Miss McClellan said, Barbara McClellan said they had camper trailer by the barn with one living in it. But if you want to close public comment, then we won't have back and forth anymore.
Thank you. Yes, I believe we will, like we said earlier, we'll close public comment for now. We'll bring it back into commission for discussion. Commissioners, the floor is yours.
I would like to preface my comments with the fact that the statement that I'm a big fan of this ministry. I think we've always approved just about everything that they've ever asked for, even with a lot of pushback from the residents in that area. And I think what they're doing is a fantastic thing, but I don't believe that they should be able to just dismiss code enforcement or building codes. So for that reason, I'm not in favor of this.
I think I agree with Ann. Support aside, I think that it sets a bad precedent if we say that these codes exist, but for this religious institution or organization, we want to enforce the code. I think that once you do that once, it becomes something that you either have to admit you're making an exemption for someone and state why, or you have to follow that precedent. And I don't think that that's a precedent that we want to start now.
I agree with you, Arthur. I think, yeah, we can't play favorites. I think we're all fans and supporters of Soul Food Cafe. It's just how do you make the decision to look the other way for some of these ordinances?
Yeah, I also agree with Arthur and with Ian. So that's where I'm leaning this evening.
Me as well.
You know, and I don't have as much of a problem about the gravel. If there's a way to prove that bearing capacity and like Mr. Hogue was saying, with the in coordination with the fire marshal, you know, I could get behind a variance there, but I still think that, you know, the access has to be provided. I think the fence has to be provided as stated in the original 2018 CUP. And I don't agree with the residents there either, because I think that opens it up, kind of like I think one of the public comments about, you know, define guest. I understand Mr. Harvey's wanting to stay there and do his work and not have to travel back and forth to his home. As someone that works around the clock, I understand that. But I do think it opens us up to other liabilities that we have to think about those neighbors for.
Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe lend a hand here.
Please.
So you had made a statement supporting a variance regarding parking. I think one thing that might, an option that exists here is if the applicant wants to submit an application for a variance on parking, that is something that you all can consider by separate application. Advancing the conditional use permit as it is, if let's say that it moves forward, it has that requirement in there. If they wanted to bring back an application and you all consider it for a gravel parking lot as was approved in 2018, that is an option. What we have before you on the application, because I know it seems a little bit strange. There's a recommendation for denial of a portion and a recommendation of approval for a different portion. So if there is agreement with the staff conditions on this, then what I would make a recommendation for the commission is to approve the conditional use permit with the conditions of approval. And then that moves on to council. The council will make a decision on that. And then if the applicant wants to come back with a request for a variance on gravel for the parking lot, that would be an appropriate means to handle that particular issue. Otherwise we're just having a...
Could we not table it and then have them to come back with the request for the parking lot? I guess there's just so much wrapped up in it. I'm not, it seems like some of the items are creating an undue hardship, and it seems like it's just because that area is it was okay a while back, and I do understand that codes change, things change, and we have to follow processes, but it just kind of seems like it was okay at one point, but because that area is developing, there's more eyes on it, then there's kind of more scrutiny on this area. So can we not table it and then have them to bring their whole request back? I may be wrong in the way I'm thinking about it, but that's just my thought and my opinion only.
Mr. Chair, may I ask who was speaking there?
Letitia Jones.
And may I make a request on that point very briefly, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think that if you guys did table it, it would give me and Mr. Finkenbinder, I think you know who he is. He's the guy that poses with his motorcycle on Facebook all the time. It would give me and Mr. Finkenbinder an opportunity to work through some of these details and make sure that what we can bring into compliance with city code is brought into compliance with city code, and figure out where we need to ask for variances and basically streamline this a little bit more so that it's a little bit clearer, and maybe fix some things in the process. So I would certainly agree with the motion to table it, because that would give me and the city attorney time to work through this and make it easier for you guys.
Well, and it sounds like in either scenario, whether we were to vote it up and you guys were to come back a month later with changes versus us tabling it for a month, I think we would go through the same exercise.
Just a suggestion.
So are you saying to go ahead and take a vote on it, Brandon, or?
Yes, if we would like to
Table
make a
it.
motion to table it till next month, and we can entertain that motion.
I think my only concern with that is just something I think we need to consider is that one of the things that got us to where we're at with these 13 recommendations is not going through the process of getting variances done. And it would seem like to me that what's really being requested here is adherence to the process, rather than an opportunity to go outside of the process. And so, because if the process had been followed, we might not be where we're at today. And so that's my only concern with tabling it, that are we as a commission, because to your point, Mr. Chairman, it's going to be the same amount of time regardless. And so based on James's recommendation on how to get this done, how to use a variance, it would just seem like that we would want to support the process. So that's just something I think the commission should consider.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I wasn't suggesting the variance. I was saying the person that was representing the applicant said, can you give me time to try to fix some of these things? We understand that they're in a bad place. I mean, we know that there are things that they need to fix. So maybe he's willing to address some of those. Their timeline is their timeline. So if it doesn't work for them, then we can just move on. But it sounded like they were willing to try to do something to correct some issues. I don't see why we wouldn't give someone an opportunity to correct issues when we know they're in violation of code.
Mr. Chairman, there's still capability to do that since it will be considered at the council level. Those conversations can still happen. It's just a matter of whether you want to hear it again or not.
Mr. Chairman, if I can also mention, as far as variances to the gravel goes, condition number 12 requires that the improvements go through the development review process outlined in the zoning code. That is typically the point in which someone would request exceptions or relief to these development standards. So approving it as written would actually, or upholding the staff recommendation as written would actually trigger that process. So it would give them the ability to submit plans and propose or request exceptions to those standards through that process.
Thank you for that note. Yes, and I agree with Rebecca. I think, as she so eloquently put it, that we kind of come to the same outcome. So I'd love to entertain a motion, whatever you guys would like to do.
I'll be happy to make that motion to approve staff recommendations as written.
A motion from Ann.
Second.
And who was that? Who made the second?
Brian.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Ann and a second from Brian. All those in favor? Well, let's go ahead and just pull a roll call because this is going to could get complicated. So, Mr. Ingram.
To make sure I understand, we're voting with the staff recommendations, which is to deny the request, correct?
It is to deny the residential use, but then approve the 13 recommendations, which would in fact kind of put them back into sequence to go through the proper processes to undergo city development review and the other things necessary, and put them in a position to request any variances that they might need that would be in opposition to some of these comments.
Okay. So then that's what we want to do. So yes.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Tucker made the motion. Ms. Fincher?
Aye.
Mr. Gaynor?
Aye.
Ms. Jones?
Abstain.
Ms. King?
I need to abstain.
Okay. I have 2 abstentions. Mr. Townsend made a second. Mr. Webb?
Aye.
And Ms. Williams?
I'll abstain.
So 3 abstentions. And I will vote yes, so that'll put us at 7-3. All right. Thank you, Mr. Hogue. Thank you, Mr. Harvey. We hope we can get this addressed with the city planning. Okay, we'll move from our public hearing into subdivision. We have preliminary plat approval for Bell Valley subdivision, of which we just heard the rezoning earlier. Mr. Hill.
Yes, familiar site. The applicant is requesting preliminary approval of a 43-lot subdivision located immediately south of the intersection of Bill Bell Lane and South German Lane. The property will be considered for rezoning at the next city council meeting after y'all's recommendation for approval. The proposed lots range from 6,000 square feet to 25,800 square feet, consistent with the lot requirements of the proposed R1 zoning district. The subdivision proposes 2 new internal streets that will provide access to the proposed lots. All proposed streets will require a 5-foot sidewalk with a 6.5-foot green space. Shared access easement is proposed for lots 37 through 39 that you may see on the preliminary plat, and that is to avoid potential conflicts with the proposed intersection there at Bill Bell Lane. No waivers were included as a part of this request, and therefore planning staff has recommended approval of the preliminary plat contingent upon the completion of the amended punch list and associated conditions of approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, again, this isn't public hearing items, so we can kind of open it up for discussion. Mr. Shaw, did you have anything to add that Mr. Hill did not cover?
No, I thank you, Levi, for presenting that on behalf of the city. And this is Frank Shaw, 1315 Main Street, Conway, Arkansas. I think I forgot to put that in the record.
Thank you.
Last time, so correct that. We're asking for this rezoning and this subdivision to be approved at 43 lots, and we will meet all city codes requirements and conditions that we have been provided. There won't be any problem with that. So we're just asking for your approval, and we're ready to move on with it if the commission gives us the approval and the council that we're going to need next week. Thank you.
Yes, sir, and thanks for staying on the line with us. Commissioners, floor is open.
Mr. Chairman, I make a recommendation to approve.
Second.
All right, Mr. Webb has a motion and a second from Mr. Gaynor. All those in favor to approve this preliminary plat approval for Bell Valley subdivision, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? And the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, may I interrupt just a moment?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's not labeled as such, but Bell Valley continue to develop. So I should have had my engineer put on here phase 1. So with the understanding that we're going to continue to use the name Bell Valley for a phase 2, as we've annexed tonight, just so that that'll be in the record. That's probably what we should have labeled this.
Thank you, Frank. And which direction will phase 2 be going?
It will be to the, let me think now, I've got to think upside down. It'll be to the north and east
Okay.
of this parcel. The other parcel we annexed, the other 21 acres, would be in the northeast corner of this parcel of property. And it would adjoin the Conway Court property on our east side and their west side.
I'm with you. Yep, directly across Bell Lane. Okay.
Direct across. It's the other parcel we annexed, but it will also be called Bell Valley. So where there's a distinction between phase 1 and phase 2 will be a question, I guess, for James or Levi. And I just need to make that point before we close out our meeting tonight.
No worries. Yep, we can make that amendment to the preliminary plat.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Listen, I've listened to all of you work tonight, and those are difficult and hard decisions and difficult to listen to. So I just want to give everybody a compliment. I listened to all of it, and without commenting on the substance of it, everyone was engaged, and that's nice to see in a city meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Commissioners, that's all that's on our agenda. If you have anything else you'd like to discuss, otherwise we can adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, you guys. Have a lovely evening.